It was just another busy shift at Street Mary's hospital when Nurse Emily found herself at the center of attention, and not in a good way. Emily, known for her warm bedside manner and tireless dedication, had always been a favorite among patients. But behind the scenes, things weren't as smooth. In the break room and even in the halls, some of her coworkers had been whispering about her, making sly comments about her methods, her choices, and even her appearance. Today, those whispers became loud, cutting remarks, and this time, they weren't hidden. Right in front of a room full of patients and staff, the mocking words flew. Maybe if you didn't spend so much time chatting with patients, you'd actually keep up. One nurse scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. Another chimed in, "Not everyone has time to be a saint, Emily." Emily's face burned with humiliation, but she held her composure, focusing on her work as best as she could. The patients looked uncomfortable, unsure of what to say. It was a scene no one could ignore. Rumors about what happened spread quickly, and by the end of the day, nearly everyone in the hospital seemed to have an opinion. Unbeknownst to the staff, a senior manager had overheard the entire incident. Word soon reached the hospital's CEO, a man known for his no-nonsense leadership and a surprising ability to spot hidden talent. What happened next wasn't just unexpected. It would change everything for Emily and the entire team. As the CEO called an urgent meeting with the hospital's leadership, whispers began to shift focus. "Why is the CEO getting involved in this?" One coworker muttered nervously. No one knew what was coming, but the tension in the air was undeniable. In the days that followed, something extraordinary unfolded, something that would not only expose the true dynamics of the team, but also redefine the culture of the hospital. Emily's story was far from over, and neither was the fallout from that fateful moment in front of the patients. What did the CEO discover? And how would it change the lives of everyone involved? Stick around because this story is about to take a turn you won't believe. Emily sat alone in the staff lounge that evening, staring blankly at her untouched coffee. The words from her coworkers replayed in her mind like a broken record. She had spent years dedicating herself to her patients, often going above and beyond to make sure they felt cared for. But today, those efforts seemed to have been twisted into something negative. She couldn't understand why her kindness and thoroughness had become a target. Her phone buzzed on the table, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from a patient who had witnessed the earlier scene. Asterisk, thank you for always being so kind. Don't let them get to you. Asterisk, Emily's eyes filled with tears. She didn't respond, but the message gave her a glimmer of hope, a small reminder of why she loved her job despite the challenges. Meanwhile, in the CEO's office, a heated discussion was taking place. James Whitman, the hospital CEO, had reviewed the report of the incident and was deeply troubled. "This isn't just about a disagreement among coworkers," he said, his voice firm. "This goes to the heart of our hospital's culture and values. If we allow this kind of behavior to continue, we're failing our staff and our patients." James wasn't the kind of leader who made decisions lightly. He wanted to understand the root of the problem. Over the next few days, he quietly began speaking to staff members, piecing together the dynamics of Emily's team. It didn't take long for him to uncover a pattern. Some of Emily's coworkers felt threatened by her popularity with patients. Others resented her high standards and her refusal to cut corners, which often made their own shortcuts more obvious. What struck James the most was how divided the team had become. A few staff members defended Emily, describing her as compassionate and hardworking. But others painted a different picture, accusing her of being self-righteous and overly critical. The conflicting stories only deepened the mystery. Was this simply a case of professional jealousy, or was there something more going on? As the CEO continued his quiet investigation, Emily tried to carry on with her work, though she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something bigger was brewing. She didn't know that her name had reached the highest levels of hospital leadership, or that her future was about to take an unexpected turn. What would James uncover next? And how would it affect not only Emily, but the entire hospital team? Emily's days at the hospital became increasingly strained. The tension with her coworkers was palpable, even when no words were exchanged. The subtle glances, the shared smirks, the overly polite, "Oh, I'll handle it," that followed her every move. It was all too much. Though she tried to focus on her patients, the weight of it hung heavy on her shoulders. She started to second-guess herself, wondering if she really was the problem. At home, Emily confided in her best friend, Sarah, who listened patiently as Emily described the situation. "Do you think I'm doing something wrong?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with doubt. Sarah shook her head firmly. "Emily, you've always been the most selfless person I know. Whatever's going on, it's not about you. It's about them." Back at the hospital, James Whitman's investigation was uncovering more than he had expected. A quiet nurse named Diane finally opened up during a one-on-one meeting. "It's not just about Emily," Diane confessed, her voice trembling. "There's been a lot of tension on our floor for months. Some people are burned out. Others feel like they're not being heard. Emily's just an easy target because she stands out." Burnout, understaffing, communication breakdowns. The CEO began to see the bigger picture. The incident with Emily was just the tip of the iceberg, a symptom of a deeper problem within the hospital. James knew that addressing these issues would require more than a quick fix. But as he dug deeper, another piece of the puzzle emerged. One of Emily's loudest critics, a senior nurse named Karen, had her own struggles. Karen had been dealing with personal issues outside of work, which had taken a toll on her patience and professionalism. She had grown resentful of Emily, who seemed to have everything under control. What Karen didn't realize was that Emily, too, was fighting her own battles. Unaware of the CEO's growing understanding of the situation, Emily began to consider whether she could keep working in such a hostile environment. "I became a nurse to help people," she told Sarah one night. "But how can I give my best when I feel like I'm walking on eggshells every day?" Meanwhile, James drafted a plan to address the floor's growing issues. It would be bold, and not everyone would like it. He didn't know how it would all play out, but he was determined to shake things up. What changes would the CEO propose? And how would Emily, her coworkers, and the entire hospital react? The morning started like any other, but the air in the hospital was unusually heavy. Emily noticed the way her coworkers whispered more than usual, glancing at her with expressions she couldn't quite read. She shrugged it off, determined to keep her focus on her patients. But deep down, a sense of unease gnawed at her. Something was happening, and she wasn't sure what. Around midday, an unexpected announcement crackled through the intercom. "Attention all staff. There will be a mandatory meeting in Conference Room B at 2 p.m. Attendance is required for all members of the nursing team." Emily's stomach flipped. Meetings like this were rare, and their suddenness usually meant one thing: trouble. As the time approached, she tried to calm herself, telling herself it was probably just another routine briefing. But the murmurs in the hallways told a different story. When the nurses filed into the room, they found James Whitman standing at the front, his expression serious but calm. A projector screen behind him displayed a single word. Asterisk respect asterisk. The room buzzed with whispered speculation. Emily sat in the back, her heart pounding. James began speaking, his voice steady but firm. "What I'm about to say may be uncomfortable for some of you, but it's necessary. Over the past few weeks, I've been investigating reports of unprofessional behavior on this floor. What I found is troubling, not just for individuals, but for the culture we've built as a team. The room went silent. No one dared to look at each other. James continued, his tone unwavering. This hospital was founded on the principles of respect, teamwork, and patient-centered care. Yet I've seen evidence that we've drifted from those values. It's not just about one person or one incident. It's about how we treat each other every single day. He paused, letting his words sink in. Then he said something that sent a ripple through the room. Effective immediately, there will be changes to how this team operates. This includes mandatory conflict resolution training, anonymous feedback surveys, and one-on-one evaluations with leadership. And let me be clear, any form of bullying or disrespect will no longer be tolerated. As James spoke, Emily noticed the shift in the room. Some nurses looked uncomfortable, others visibly relieved. Karen, sitting across the room, avoided Emily's gaze entirely. Then came the moment that took everyone by surprise. Finally, James said, his eyes scanning the crowd, "I want to commend one of your colleagues who, despite facing immense pressure, has consistently demonstrated the values we should all strive for. Emily, would you please stand up?" Every head turned toward her, and Emily froze. The room seemed to hold its breath. What would James say next? And how would the team respond? Emily felt the weight of 100 stares as she slowly stood. Her legs felt unsteady, and her face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and confusion. She wasn't sure what to expect. Was this recognition, or was it another moment that would make her feel even more isolated? James smiled kindly at her before turning back to the group. Emily has shown extraordinary resilience and dedication under difficult circumstances. Her focus on patient care and her ability to stay professional, even when faced with challenges, is an example we can all learn from. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. Emily noticed Karen shifting uncomfortably in her seat. A few nurses exchanged awkward glances, their expressions unreadable. But before Emily could process the moment fully, James continued. "However," he said, his tone sharpening, "what I've also uncovered is that this isn't just about one person being singled out. There's something much deeper going on here, something that threatens the integrity of our team." He stepped closer to the group, his gaze piercing. "During my investigation, I received feedback that points to serious issues in how this team communicates and supports one another. And unfortunately, I've discovered that some of the behaviors targeting Emily were not just passive but actively orchestrated." The room erupted in a murmur, with whispers growing louder as people tried to make sense of what he'd said. Emily's stomach dropped. "Asterisk orchestrated." Asterisk, the word echoed in her mind, and she felt a cold chill run down her spine. James raised a hand, silencing the chatter. "This goes beyond simple misunderstandings or workplace disagreements. It's clear that some individuals have been intentionally creating an environment of hostility, not just toward Emily but others as well. I have specific names and incidents documented." The shock was palpable. Karen's face turned pale, and a few other nurses shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Emily scanned the room, her heart pounding. Who else was involved, and why? James leaned forward, his voice firm but calm. "Let me be clear. This behavior stops today. Those involved will face consequences, and moving forward, this team will operate with transparency and respect, or not at all. But I'll give you all the chance to reflect and come forward privately if there's more I need to know." The announcement hung in the air, leaving everyone stunned. For Emily, it felt like the ground beneath her feet was shifting. Was this the beginning of real change, or would things only get worse? And who, she wondered, had been orchestrating this all along. The room sat in stunned silence long after James finished speaking. Emily, still standing, felt a mix of vindication and dread. She had been trying to focus on her patients and keep her head down, but now everything was out in the open. Whatever came next, there was no going back. Karen, visibly shaken, suddenly stood up. All eyes turned to her as she cleared her throat. "I need to say something," she began, her voice trembling. Emily's heart raced. Was Karen about to confess? Karen avoided Emily's gaze as she spoke. I've been struggling. At home, at work, it's been hard. And I guess I took some of that out on Emily." Her voice cracked, and she paused to collect herself. I was wrong. She didn't deserve that. None of it. A murmur swept through the room, and Emily felt her chest tighten. Karen's admission was unexpected, but it didn't explain everything. James nodded. "Thank you for your honesty, Karen. It's important to own our actions, but as I said, there's more to this." He gestured toward the door, and to everyone's surprise, Diane, the quiet nurse who had spoken to James during his investigation, walked in. "I think it's time everyone knows the truth," Diane said, her voice steady. "This wasn't just Karen. There was a group of us." The room gasped. Diane's confession unraveled the final layer of the mystery. She went on to explain how some nurses, feeling overshadowed by Emily's work ethic and patient rapport, had conspired to make her job more difficult. They spread rumors, coordinated to exclude her from team decisions, and even exaggerated her mistakes to management. "I went along with it," Diane admitted, her voice heavy with guilt. "At first, it was just venting, but then it became something uglier. I didn't stop it, and I should have." James let the weight of her words settle before addressing the group. "What happened here is unacceptable, but what happens next is up to all of you. Change doesn't come from punishment alone. It comes from accountability and a willingness to do better. Emily deserves better. Our patients deserve better. Now is the time to decide what kind of team you want to be." As James dismissed the meeting, Karen and Diane approached Emily. "I'm sorry," Karen said softly, tears in her eyes. Diane nodded, her face etched with remorse. Emily hesitated, then said, "It's not easy to admit when you're wrong. Thank you for that." But as the nurses left the room, James pulled Emily aside. "There's one more thing," he said. "I've been watching you, and I think you're exactly what this team needs to rebuild. I want you to step into a leadership role here, if you're ready." Emily's eyes widened in shock. She had never considered herself a leader, but maybe that was about to change. As the weight of the past few weeks began to lift, she realized this could be the start of something new, not just for her, but for the entire hospital. As she left the room, she glanced back, feeling a strange sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were finally heading in the right direction. But deep in her heart, she knew that trust wouldn't come easily, and that rebuilding would be the hardest work of all. The days following the meeting were anything but easy. Emily stepped into her new role cautiously, unsure if her coworkers would truly embrace the changes or if the same hostility would resurface. But to her surprise, there was a noticeable shift in the air. It started small, an apology from a nurse in passing, a kind smile where there once was coldness, and even a few tentative attempts at collaboration. Karen was one of the first to extend an olive branch. She began working more closely with Emily, volunteering to help on particularly challenging cases. Though their interactions were initially awkward, they slowly found common ground. Karen even shared some of her struggles, and Emily listened without judgment. It wasn't an instant friendship, but it was a step toward understanding. The hospital implemented the changes James had promised. The conflict resolution training forced everyone to confront the issues they had been avoiding for far too long. The anonymous surveys gave staff a voice, and the one-on-one evaluations allowed James and the leadership team to address underlying concerns directly. Slowly but surely, the team began to rebuild trust, not just with Emily, but with one another. For Emily, the biggest change wasn't in her coworkers, but in herself. The experience had been humbling, but it also reminded her of why she became a nurse in the first place. She realized that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about creating a space where everyone felt seen and valued. And though she still faced challenges, she approached them with a renewed sense of purpose. One afternoon, as she was finishing her rounds, Emily noticed a familiar face in the waiting room. It was the patient who had sent her the encouraging message after that terrible day. The woman smiled and waved, mouthing, "Thank you." Emily felt a lump in her throat as she waved back. In that moment, she understood something profound. The work she did, no matter how small it seemed, mattered. And while the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, she knew she had the strength to face it and the support to make it through. As she walked down the hall, she caught a glimpse of James watching from his office. He gave her a small, approving nod. Emily smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, not just for her, but for the entire hospital. And for the first time in months, she felt hopeful about the future.